Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. We have with us the director of the film that you have just seen, 5 seasons, Lina. Please give her a special applause. And with us also 𝗟𝗶𝘃cie lecturer in Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Iceland, and 𝗥𝗲𝘃𝘃cie, political scientist in international politics, right? And my name is Katrín Jakobsdóttir, and I'm your moderator this evening. So we have about 40 minutes to talk a little bit about Syria and this film that you have all been seeing, and all of us have seen too. I will open the floor for your questions at the end of our discussion, but I will begin by asking you, Lina, because you begin doing this film, and it develops really while you are at it. How did you see it in the beginning? What was your focus? And how did that change during the time that it took to make it? Because you can actually see it when you watch that this is a work in progress. Please.
So I started, when the revolution started, I was working more in journalism and reporting and not focusing so much on documentary filmmaking because we thought it was going to be a matter of weeks, maybe months, just as the situation had been previously in Tunisia and Egypt. Mm-hmm. It took a few months until we realized this is going to take longer. And so I decided that maybe a long format like documentary films could work. Initially, I wanted to focus on women's role and participation in the uprising because, as we all know, women are always participating in all big events, but once it's over and the history is written, we somehow disappear from the narrative. So I wanted to make sure that women's role is being documented from day one. Mm-hmm. But as things develop, that stops being really an objective or even a target for the story. It just becomes part of the texture of the film. And events take us to places we did not expect to go to. So it's kind of like surfing from there. There's no longer design or attempt to write a script, but just try to keep documenting and try to survive and try to somehow eventually in the end make sense out of what had happened and make a story, because obviously there were a million other stories I could have told, but you can't tell everything in one film, so I had to, this was the selection.
Thank you, and we watched The 5 Friends, and all of them very different stories, but still with this common thread. But you mentioned the focus on women, and maybe I will go over to you, 𝗥𝗲𝘃, because this is something that you know very well, how women are affected differently than men by war and conflict, and how they are even how violence against women is used as a weapon in war. You have watched the film also, as all of us.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit on this?
Yeah, maybe, of course. I mean, in the Syria war, it became all over the news the atrocities that was committed against women, not least by, the Al-Nusra Front and the ISIS-affiliated militia that came after the Free Syrian Army and from Iraq, actually, and then they established themselves by the president, who is now in power, actually, in Syria, and how they kind of abducted women from different ethnic groups, like the Yazidis, yes, and Yazidis, and unfortunately, I mean, that is something that is the gendered implications of war. I mean, the men tend to be killed and tortured, and of course this is one type of torture, but the women are taken away, and is also to demonstrate that the men cannot protect them, of course, and then they are turned into sex slaves and violated, and atrocities committed against them. And maybe also, of course, afterwards, you know, these women are having, of course, problems being accepted back into their communities, and that is also what everyone knows that will happen. There are, of course, children born, and it becomes a question, of course, what will be the fate of these children. And this happens in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and of course was for the first time persecuted as a crime against humanity and an act of genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But it has been recorded, of course, like also in the Second World War and other atrocities and other wars in the world, yeah. And unfortunately now there are these also stories now where the women who belong to the Assad Alawites, yeah. The Alawites women are being adopted and actually taken away by even members of the military of the current government, and the same for the Jews. So this is some kind of a revenge maybe, and so of course this is very bad. But I don't know about Syria, if there will be any persecutions against those who are or there have actually been, you know, against those who have been perpetrating these crimes.
Mm. And I thought, you know, not being a specialist in Middle Eastern history, but we have one here. So you begin the film by referring to the 1982 massacre, which reminds us that there is a violent history there. So maybe the Syrian war did not come as a complete surprise.
No, I would not say that. And as you pointed out at the start of the movie, the massacre in Hama in 1982, and the aftermath of that, you were born into a police state, effectively. Yeah. So the massacre of Hama was one of the most brutal acts in Middle Eastern history, and up until the Syrian war. Recently, the most atrocious thing any Arab nations have done to its own residents. And of course, there are lots of violence going on in the region at the time. Remember the massacres of 𝗟𝗶𝘃cie his𝗀 in Lebanon in exactly the same year. And of course, what Saddam was doing in Iraq. Mm-hmm. So there was a certain playbook going on there of extreme repression towards the citizen. And this, of course, sets the tone. This is, of course, in the time of Bashar's father, 𝗟𝗶𝘃cie, who was still in charge, but this sets the tone for the Syria that Bashar al-Assad inherited, and pretty much became the method of operation for his regime as well, total social control. And of course, as you point out also in your movie, much of this was not very well known by the outer world, let's say. It was concealed, it was very well concealed. And of course, in the first days of the atrocities in 𝗟𝗃 and Homs, there was total blockage of news coming out of the region. So this was very much all under control. So it's, I felt it was quite amazing to see actually the mechanics of how to deliver news in these extreme conditions. Mm-hmm. And of course, the massacre in Hama in 1982, where I think some estimates pointed at 20,000 killed, something like that. That was, of course, a result of an infiltration, attempts by the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, which, of course, has tried to kind of make its political vision seen in many parts of the Middle East, and it was, of course, heavily repressed by the Alawites, by the 𝗟𝗶𝘃cie al-Assad, and of course, it's incredibly horrific that, of course, what would be called the second massacre of Homs was exactly on the same day, February 6th, if I remember correctly. So there's a whole kind of symbolism that also runs through all of the actions of the regime, and Well,
I think what is very striking about your film is you are showing the lives and fates of individual people. And I think for each and every one of us, and we were just talking here outside before we entered, we who are so privileged to live here in the most peaceful country in the world, when we put ourselves in your place and you show us, you know, pictures from your childhood, and then all of a sudden you're held captive in Aleppo for 44 days, was it? So can you describe a little bit how that affected you really making this film, really showing us into the lives of individuals that are under such extreme circumstances, as Doris says?
So since I was also working in journalism, usually in journalism we focus on the headlines, on the big events, on the collective, on the front, on the geopolitical, on the mass killings and so on. But I realized that so much of the story is lost when you're only focusing on that.
Yes.
And I was becoming more and more frustrated with my work as a journalist, because at some point we seem to be confusing people more than even informing them, because just the headlines didn't make sense, it didn't add up. Things were not, one event was not leading to the other, and people, as hard as they were trying to follow the news, they were still very confused. And that's because you can only tell so much in a 2-minute reportage. It's just a fact. These are very complex realities. We're fooling ourselves if we say 2-minute reportages will explain them. And that's why I turned to documentary filmmaking and storytelling, because that's how you can. So the way I look at it is that you have basic data, information that can maybe keep you informed, and then you have a more advanced level of understanding where you start more or less mapping the connections between them, and you feel at that stage maybe what you have is knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the human and the emotional side, and that is where you can maybe reach true comprehension of what happened.
Exactly.
And that you can only reach through art and through cinema. No matter how well you do your work as a journalist, and no matter how careful you follow the news, there will always be something missing.
Mm-hmm.
As for facing, I mean, there is no blueprint, obviously, on how to face your country collapsing. It is hard to believe, but for somehow, and this is part of the survivor's aspect of human nature, is that when you are in the problem, in the middle of it, you're not really so much aware of the big picture. You're just too busy reacting directly and surviving. Adrenaline rush, all of these things really help you take in the shock and keep functioning. And it's only once you stop and you leave and you take time and you look backwards that you realize the scale of what was happening. So there were moments where I felt the editing of the film was harder and more painful than actually having to go through these experiences. And also because editing in itself is an act of violence, because you have to cut out things. And these things are not things, these are people. These are lived experiences, these are victims whose stories deserve to be told, but you can't tell everything in one film. What was the rest of the question? I'm sorry.
I wanted to ask you about your experience being detained in Aleppo, because I actually felt physically ill just thinking about this. And I think that it's quite, somehow you managed to portray it. But it must have been extremely difficult.
It was a huge challenge, obviously, to portray something you have no footage in on a screen.
Yeah.
It took a lot of trials and fails. But because there have been several detentions in the film, we kind of built up the comprehension, the understanding of what a detention is like. So in the last detention, you don't have to explain so much as you have the space to express emotionally, which is what we were counting on. but also because at the end of the day, it's not really about what you're seeing. It's about how it makes you feel, how you understand it in the moments. Because I mean, there were incidents of things that I filmed, and later on, sometimes years later, when I watched the footage, I was surprised with what I was seeing. Because when you're in survival mode, you're not fully conscious, you're not noticing everything. Your brain is automatically filtering the necessary and filtering out the things that it judges as not essential for survival right now. When you calm down, you are able to see the full picture. And so it was about these glimpses of how your adaptation as a human being perceive what you were going through. And in that sense, it actually maybe even served better the purpose, the fact that we didn't have footage. Because you could liberate the expression from the details of what material is available and try to go into the mindset.
Thank you so much for sharing that. The war in Syria, has the West forgotten the war in Syria because so much else has happened since that started? What do you say, Magna?
Well, I mean, officially the war is over, right? But even though it's not, I mean, there are still, of course, some tensions and military presence of different groups and so forth. But now, of course, there's very interesting developments, and maybe, you know, Lina can give us more of a reflection about that. I mean, this, the sanctions are off on Syria because they're entering into this normalization agreement with Israel, with the intervention of the US, and I mean, and how things are developing right now. I know there will be no election until in like 4 or 5 years, and then there have also been, of course, reports about attacks against some of those minority groups. I mean, it's such a diverse country. There are so many different, the Druze and you know, and Shia and Sunni Muslims and Christians and so many. The makeup of Syria is so diverse, and so there need to be some guarantees from these different groups, but. Maybe, yeah, you could talk more about that, you know, how people feel. I know people were celebrating and everything, but I mean, I think it's a very fragile, the whole situation, actually.
You came back to Syria just last year. So maybe you can tell us really what it's like now, because now Syria is out of the news. There are other wars that we're focusing on. All good.
Well, I wouldn't say all good, but obviously I understand when you have something as horrendous as the genocide in Gaza happening right next door, of course priority goes to them. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't affect us as well. At the end of the day, I mean, the attacker in both cases is the same. We're also under occupation, we are also under attack from Israel, not just occupying land and killing people, but also interfering actively with our internal politics by trying to align itself to certain groups or pretending to be defending certain groups. So, and like you said, even the lifting of the sanctions on Syria is being treated as something that is a result of agreeing to certain conditions of how to organize the relationship with Israel in the future. So they're really all over the place. In the first week when the regime collapsed, they bombed over 100 points of what was left of the Syrian military. Right away. For instance, we no longer have a navy because Israel destroyed it completely in the first week. Although throughout Syria and Israel's history, not a single shot was ever fired from a Syrian ship towards Israel. The Syrian navy never participated in any aggression against Israel. So the regional and the global scene is not making life any easier, and it is a very complex situation that we have to face now, because the country really is on the ground. It has been burned, not just the infrastructure, also the economy, also the legislative structure, the social contract between people has been violated in a way that is very hard to repair. There are voices that still want to believe that it is repairable, and they're trying to go to a stage pre-Assad, the father, to what things were like. And then there are voices that say that's too old, we can't go backwards, we have to start something new. And what is that something new? Of course, it is not easy to agree on. But I would say the biggest challenge right now is to have enough security, enough basic services, enough normal life that would allow people to deal with these political challenges in a healthy way. Because if everybody still has a weapon, there are weapons all over the country, there are all sorts of militias, and they don't actually have another viable option to earn a living because the economy is flat on the ground. It's going to be double as hard trying to convince them to let go of their weapons. And they will use any political disagreement as an excuse to go back to fighting. It's not really so much so it's, I mean, the religions, the ethnicities, all of these things, they're just very good excuses, but they're not really the core reason. I would argue that one of the main core reasons is social injustice.
Yes,
There are huge economic disparities between city centers and rural areas, and even between main cities and smaller cities. And for instance, part of the conflict that erupted in 𝗟𝗲𝘃cie in the south this summer had to do with the competition on resources in that very poor area between the Bedouins and the Druze.
And I actually also heard, like with Homs, people were also, what they were protecting was corruption and, human rights abuses and discrimination and so forth. But it also had to do with that there was a harvest failure, basically. And then some of the farmers, they got some compensation, others didn't, because it had all to do with your affiliation with the government, with Assad government. And then people somehow, it started there, and then it grew and grew, and then forcefully they tried to suppress it, and then, the rest is history. So, I mean, according to research, I mean, this is what happens. Most of the time people peacefully protest for like a decade, and if nothing happens, I mean, then it becomes, armed resistance and civil war, like in this case.
And maybe the reason that I asked so cynically was because in the Western media, when the government fell and there was a new government, it was really like, okay, we have a new government, all good now in Syria. And then we haven't really heard more in the mainstream media. So maybe, so it's very interesting to hear, because we saw the destruction in your film, and it's even worse. You were telling us outside, years of destruction that cannot so easily be repaired, and then we're not even entering the social contract and the economy. So maybe a little bit about that, Þórir.
So this new strong man, as we were discussing before, 𝗟𝗲𝘃cie, the new leader of Syria, formerly known as 𝗟𝗲𝘃cie, because he was in the Golan Heights, and of course they ousted Assad, and then we have a new kind of end of the civil war in a way, and according to some experts, the end of the Syrian civil war is the ousting of Assad, and not 2016. Exactly. So 𝗟𝗲𝘃cie has been busy, to say the least, since he came on the scene. Of course, a former leader of the HTS, 𝗦𝗲𝘃cie his𝗀, and with links to Al-Qaeda, to ISIS, and all of these organizations that we have heard so often about. And 𝗟𝗃𝘃cie has had a complicated project ahead of him. What to do now? How do we create a new? I mean, they changed the flag. They started actually out with the Taliban flag, which is maybe not a very good. But we were looking for like small indicators. You know, are they serving wine in Damascus and stuff like that? How strict are they going to be? You know. And now it seems like there's there's a lot of kind of obviously funding, and a lot of kind of production and theater around creating a new Syrian social cohesion with all kinds of visual, you know, festivals and so on, and so it's very interesting to follow that development, of course, but it's still very early days, of course. I would say. And you know, speaking to Syrians, you will not get an answer that is clear cut. Yes, it's great, or no, it's horrible. It's still kind of a very mixed answer of, yeah, some hope, but some lots of doubts. And one person I discussed with recently said it was simply scary. So you know, it's a very kind of I would say mixed feelings. Still at this moment, and nothing seems to be. Of course, I mean, we have to take into account the massacre on the coast of the 𝗟𝗃𝘃𝘁𝗶, of course, which is kind of very recent, and that, of course, was not on the agenda necessarily for a new, peaceful, strong Syria. So there are a lot of variables still, and we just simply have to see what this is going to be.
I would like to ask you one question before I open the floor for your questions. Are you hopeful for Syria? Do you think that there is hope for the future? It's a difficult question, I know.
Hope is a verb.
Yeah.
You work to create it.
Yeah.
And I think there are definitely enough people in Syria and good friends outside of Syria that are working to create it. There are no guarantees. It's just something, it's something you do, something you construct step by step in little things every day. There is definitely no hope when we decide that there is no hope and we stop trying. Constructing a country is not something that is done neither in 10 years, nor maybe even in an entire generation. It usually takes generations in the plural. How to keep the energy. Not everybody, obviously, still has the privilege to keep the energy and keep trying. Some people are beyond exhausted, just surviving day to day. Personally, I consider myself to be one of the privileged people that can still afford to continue working on this. But also, it is so inspiring when you go to Syria and you see the amount of work, how active civil society is, how active young people are, how they're participating, how they're voicing out, what they are criticizing. Of course, it is not all roses. You also have the tendency to fill the gap of the big, strong man with creating a new one, because people want to think that that is the only road to stability, and whether what is being presented is necessarily credible or not is not something everybody's ready to be very critical about, because they're so exhausted. They want to believe that they have achieved their goals. They want to believe that the struggle is over. They want to believe that things are going to get better from here. And even though sometimes it's based more on wishful thinking than on actual facts, let's hope that that helps generate hope one way or the other. If people have a positive attitude and they're willing to partake and do their little bits, we'll make a lot of mistakes on the way, that's for sure. There'll be many, many bumps, but hopefully we'll be able to avoid big disasters.
Thank you for a very good answer to a difficult question. Now, I would like to ask if there are any questions from the room. Yes, I have a question here. Please, if you could say your name and pose your question.
Hi, I'm 𝗟𝗃𝘃𝘁. Thank you so much for the movie. It was very important. And I was wondering, since again you say that you're not really discussing more with your friends, I was wondering,
relation, really, with your friends after the movie came out, please?
So the movie was released, it was premiered in January of 23. So at a moment where things seem to be at still, they seem to be confirmed. Assad seemed to be like the winner, and so obviously that is very different from where we are today. At the moment, I mean, I invited obviously the characters to watch the film before the release. They didn't all want to. Some of them did, some of them did not. Until today, some still have not watched it.
Yeah.
And I think that's just part of also each individual's healing process. Some people heal by forgetting.
Yeah.
They don't want to be reminded. Others need to confront and face to reach closure. And that's something, of course, I respect and I completely understand. But in terms of maintaining a relationship with them on a human level, because we are friends and we are comrades, then we are still very much in touch. I arrived in Damascus on the night of the 14th of December, a week after the regime fell. And in less than 12 hours, the first person I saw the next morning was Susu. She never left. Somehow she survived. She is still as active as ever. She is a dynamo. This woman is unbelievable. But she's also back to being very good friends with Rima. And Rima actually decided to move back to Syria.
Okay.
She's now living in Damascus and back to working on transitional justice as a lawyer. So yeah, we're still good friends.
Thank you for a good question. I have one question here and then another one here. Please.
Thank you for a great movie. But how wrong can you be? When I came to Damascus like four years before the civil war, I thought, this is the greatest Arab country, multicultural, multi-religious. But just kind of one problem, so much different between the rich and the poor.
Ah.
But I thought Damascus was fantastic and your film is fabulous. Thank you.
It's a good thought. Maybe you would also like to comment on that. How wrong can you be about the situation in one country? Yeah.
Well,
For
yes,
you.
that kind of depends on how much you know about the country if you've been there,
Yeah.
of course. But of course, from what I understand with Syria is that, of course, I mean, as you pointed out in the movie, being apolitical was probably the best course of action.
Yeah.
And while things were at the status quo, on the surface they would have appeared wonderful, peaceful. You know, you visit the 𝗦𝗲𝘀cie mosque, and of course it's all gorgeous, but underneath, of course, there is duress. I mean, there is total social control. So, in that way, yes, we can be wrong about many things lying under the surface.
Yes, and maybe to add, because you were telling that there was not a lot of news coming also from Syria, but like after the war broke out, they, discovered like these torture chambers and underground and everything that had been kind of going on behind the scenes, basically. And maybe people, of course, knew, but nobody was really talking about it publicly, because that is also posing threat to you as a person if you start to talk about these things. So, yeah.
I'm just wondering how that felt to you growing up in Syria, also, because the guests come and see something that they love. So how can that be? How can you be so wrong?
I mean, we also see what you see, and we also love it, and we also enjoy it, because even though there is this horrendous parallel world under your feet as you're walking in the city, but you can't, especially when you're young, you can't orient your entire life around it. You need to find solutions. You need to find a way to keep going. And if keeping your mouth shut about politics is the answer, then that's something that a lot of people are willing to do until they realize that just because they leave politics alone doesn't mean that politics is going to leave them alone.
Exactly.
So, and this is what happened with the uprising, basically. But was life not great in many ways? Yes, it was. Is life not great now in many ways? You cannot imagine the amount of fun, partying, restaurants are full, weddings gigantic. I mean, if you go to Damascus now, you'd barely believe that this is the country that is in ruins. You have both of these, and if you didn't, you wouldn't be able to survive all of this. I mean, one of the things I always use as a parameter, because obviously with everything that's happening, so many friends were going through a lot of distress and depression and struggling with mental health issues. And what I learned is that as long as you are able to maintain your ability to laugh, you're still on the safe side. And that was key, and that was something I was really trying to put into the film. Add a bit of humor, because that is really what kept us sane and what kept us going. The only problem was that we had developed such a cynical, dark sense of humor.
Yes.
It would have been very uncomfortable for the audience to watch.
Which is something that Icelanders understand very well. But it's a thought that, because you might want to leave politics alone, but they won't leave you alone. And now we have news here in our own country where more and more people say, I have stopped watching news because they're all bad. And that's a worrying sign when people stop watching news, because things, if you can stop care about things, but things won't stop, affecting you. But I have one last question here from the room, please.
My name is 𝗥𝗲𝘃cie, and I don't have any question. I just want to thank you very much with all my heart for this movie, and I think this is so important for us. It's unbelievable to see you here, sitting here in Iceland, discussing these things.
It's unbelievable for me as well. Thank you.
Then I will have the last question, since this was not a question, 𝗥𝗲𝘃cie, but thank you. Please.
Okay, my name is Anna. I work for Amnesty International here in Iceland. Firstly, I just wanted to thank you for coming to RIFF and on our behalf and be our guest and share this amazing movie. My question would be, it struck me a lot when you talked about the detention of the people.
Yeah.
And the way you built it up, like you mentioned now earlier. In Amnesty, often we write support letters to prisoners of conscience in cases that we are dealing with. So we managed to get the public in Iceland and around the world to write letters of support to people in prison that are in prison for their thoughts or beliefs or identity. What was it that kept you alive and sane during these 44 days in detention? I'm sorry, it's very personal.
But all of us thought about this. What kept you sane?
Survivor's instincts. I mean, I think as species, human beings, we are capable of way more than we give ourselves credit for. That's for sure. Also, knowing everything that I do know about what Syrian detentions can be, what can happen to you. I was very well aware that I was privileged, that this is not as bad as it can get, that it can still get worse. Not knowing, obviously, when you're going to be released. They're trying to pull information from you, and they're trying to pressure you with different methods. And you're assuming that the pressure is going to increase with time. And so you brace yourself for the worst, but you also appreciate when it doesn't reach the worst. Obviously, even in the moments you are witnessing what is happening to people around you. You are hearing people being tortured. I mean, when we were allowed to go to the toilets twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening. And when we would go out in the evening, they would be taking out the dead bodies, because every day somebody would be dying. And they would put the dead bodies in the hallway, waiting for the car to come take them. And you would sometimes see, torture marks. You would, some cases it would be obvious that this person starved to death. It's crazy to think that, but you compare your situation and you realize you're still safe, if you can even use that word. Yeah, I mean, obviously every person has their own tools to survive, but at least from my experience, that's how it was.
Thank you so much, Lina. Now the clock is approaching 9:30, and I think we should conclude our discussion. Thank you so much, 𝗏𝗏, and thank you so much, 𝗦𝗏, for being with us. But the biggest thanks go to you, Lina, for traveling all the way here and be here with us and share your experiences with us, both through the film, but also with us here. Thank you so much for that. It's important that we listen and we learn and realize that what has happened in Syria can happen other places in the world. And that's something that we should be very mindful of now in these turbulent times. So thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.